on the agenda, but before we do that, as a mark of respect for a former councillor who was a councillor 30 some years ago, Councillor Rita Briggs passed away, I believe, last week, and I'd like to just hold silence for a minute in respect of the lady, and I would like to ask that the full council does the same at the meeting next week. Right, I think that'll do. We'll get on with business if that's okay with everybody. Public question time. I don't think there's any of the members of the public logged in, so we've no need to worry about that. Public bodies, amended openness of local government bodies. Is there anything to worry about there, Richard? No.
We are recording the meeting.
Right, you're recording the meeting, right, that's fine. To accept apologies for absence, have we any?
We've got apologies from Councillor Colling and Councillor Feeney.
And we've got Councillor Sheard, who's actually resigned from the committee. Yeah, I think the figures did her in at the end.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Necessary evil, I'm afraid.
Pardon?
A necessary evil, I'm afraid, the figures.
Necessary evil. I thought I was evil.
I don't think you're evil at all, Paul.
Right. To receive members' personal and disclosable pecuniary interest in items on the agenda, have we any?
Nope.
Right. To receive officers' personal and disclosable pecuniary interest in items on the agenda, have we any?
No.
No. Right. To consider written requests for new DPI dispensations.
No.
Any?
No.
No. To consider whether items on the agenda should be discussed in private session. Nobody got anything? To confirm the minutes of the previous committee meeting, to note that minutes of the Finance and Management Committee meeting held on the 2nd of March, numbered 1920-74 to 1920-98 inclusive, previously distributed, already confirmed by Council. All in favour? Right. Schedule of accounts for payment to approve the full schedule of accounts for June 2020. Part approved by Council already. Item C. Are we all in favour of those? Is there anybody with problems with them? Right, all in favour, we'll move on. You know, the chairman has made no expenditure or donations in the interim. That will be noted. Financial statement to approve the accounting summaries. Copies enclosed for February 2020 D to the 5th of March. Payments to the 5th of March. Has anybody anything they wish to say on those? Bank reconciliation on all accounts to the 5th of March 2020. Year to date budget report for the 5th of March 2020. No comments, right? Turn over the page. Oh my God, everybody's coming out to play now. What's up with something just finished on telly? March 2020 receipts to the 31st of March 2020. Payments to the 31st of March 2020. Bank reconciliations all accounts to the 31st of March and the year-to-date budget report to the 31st of March. Anybody, any problems with those? What's your view, Richard? Do we just note all these?
I think, well, I mean, yeah, I think you do, but obviously that's your job to be checking, really, I think. But there's no issues come up about it.
Well, I have no issues. For April 20F, have we any questions on that? The same with V, the same with H. I don't see anything that comes to light to me that makes a cause the problem. Right, we'll move on to item 10, final accounts for 2019-20. To note the preparations of the final accounts, Richard to report. Number 1, budget and reserves, 31st of March. What have you got to say, Richard?
I was just going to, well, I wrote a little report that you probably have seen. I was just going to let you know about how it had gone over the last few months doing the final accounts, because it was a bit of a challenge, to be honest, partly because of the previous RFO leaving things in a bit of a mess, and partly my own ignorance of the role, I guess. So I got to the end of the year, and it was only at the end of the year that, looking back to last year's figures, I found out that we'd had like £20,000 worth of debt that we carried over from last year from 2018-19 into 2019-20. Obviously I didn't have a handover from Tony Marler, so I was a bit in the dark about that, and it only appeared you know, when I was doing the final books. So what that meant was, effectively, we were £20,000 better off than we expected, because the 20,000 had already been accounted for in last year's figures. I just wanted to make sure that councillors were aware that this had gone on, because I'm not entirely sure they would have been, because it was never mentioned to me while I was going through my work. And it seems like a thing that I would have been told about, really. So I suppose just warning councillors just to check the amount of debt that's carried over. There's a bit carried over this year, but it's already been accounted for, really. This was kind of hidden in a way. It's not dodgy. It's not being dodgy. It's not actually done anything wrong. It just disguised the fact that we were in a better position than I was expecting, to be honest. So that was my first point. So in terms of our position, we're in a very good position. Our reserves went up, but not outrageously so. We saved a bit of money on the budget last year, but obviously we earmarked some reserves for the COVID situation. So I think essentially we're in quite a positive position as a council in terms of our finances and our reserves and the budget ahead. The internal audit has been in, as you've perhaps read, and in terms of the books, because I was basically copying the way the previous RFO had done it, she said that this was inadequate, really. That it wasn't about the figures. Again, it was just about the recording of the debts and credits going over between financial years. But I've sorted it all now, so everything balances perfectly. I've had the training today from the new accounts people, and they said it all balanced. So you know, that's all gone well. So yeah, that's my sort of report on that bit. The AGAR's been finished. There were two things that we didn't do well on. One was to do with Tony Marler not giving the public access to the financial accounts in the appropriate time frame last year. He should have done it by the first week in July, but he didn't. It was done after that. So they pulled us on that. And both Tony Marler and myself made a mistake with the VAT that we reclaimed. I've already corrected that anyway in the first claim of this year, so that should all balance now. But those are the two areas that the internal auditor picked me up on. But like I say, they've been corrected. Okay, so that's final accounts. So it'll be good to go at full council next week. Myself and Liz will be going over them all next week, and everything will be good to go for approval by council on Monday.
Thank you, Richard. Do you wish to speak on the other items, numbers 1 to 5 on this balance sheet? Sorry, on this sheet, the budget and reserves. Have you anything to say on that?
Just got somebody wanting to come in. Just give me a second.
I've noted that. Richard, do you want to say anything before we open it up?
Councillor Carey wants to ask something or to say something.
I'm just wondering before he comes in. I was just wanting to know if you had any comments to make.
No. I'm. You know, my comments are that it's looking quite good, really. That we're in quite a good position. Reserves are looking good without being outrageously so. So I think it's quite a positive thing, really. Right,
Doug's now.
It's a simple question, really. The 20,000, Rich. Who owed us that amount of money? I'm just curious to know who owes us money and why it's such a large amount.
It wasn't a question of being owed it. It was basically money that had been committed in the year 2018 to 19 that we had committed to pay. So we had committed to pay it. So it was put through the books as a debt, basically.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Pay back into the previous year. Now that had already been accounted for by Tony Marler, so it was already in the previous year's books as credit, as a debt. So it was all accounted for. It's just obviously I came in without that handover.
Right, okay, that's all right.
That 20,000 quid. It looks like a debit. It looks like a debt, but it wasn't a debt. It actually meant we had more money in our budget last year than we thought we did.
Right. I was just wanting to make sure we're not that we're chasing any debtors, you know, in a timely manner. But it seems like it was a one-off.
No, it's
not matter of accounting and
accounting rather than money. It's not. Yeah.
Anything to report on the balance sheet, Richard? Nothing.
I don't think. Oh, is that somebody else coming in? Not really. I mean, because because of the size of the council, we have to use this income and expenditure approach to accountancy, where we've got to sort of account for VAT we've claimed. So things like VAT recoverable, that is recovered in this year, but it kind of feeds back into last year. In terms of the creditors, that is what was creditors now? Oh, creditors was two invoices for the West Yorkshire Combined Authority for the minibuses, which we only got in April. So they were paid this year, but they applied to last year. And the third one was the Climate Emergency Action Plan, which we didn't get in March, and therefore that was also carried over into 2020 to 21. But it's not debt as such. It's already all accounted for. It's just in terms of the accounting processes, that's how we have to record it. Similarly, payments in advance. That basically was where we paid for insurance for ourselves and the Civic Hall. And what was the other thing? I think it was just those two things. So it's all accounted for. It all balanced perfectly with a lot of me with my calculator.
Right, thank you. Welcome, Rachel. We're on item number 10, final accounts for 1990 to 2020.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Apologies for being late.
Statement of income and expenditure, Richard. Nothing to report there, I don't think.
No, again, I mean, they're all basically the same. It's the same statistics reported in a different way. So yeah, we you know, in terms of where we got like about £40,000, £45,000 more than we had the previous year. but we do have more in reserves than more in earmarked reserves than we did last year.
Right. Agar, anything to report there?
I suppose just again to make sure that councillors check this, because last year's figures that Tony Marler had done, they didn't add up properly even this, where you've just got to add the first 3 figures together, take away the next 3 and then get the final figure in box 7. Those didn't add up. So, you know, just to check that I've done those calculations properly would be helpful. And then the last bit is to do with the bank reconciliation, which I took ages trying to sort this out. It was a right old faff, but you've got to reconcile box 7 and box 8 in terms of debt and credits. That's I5 basically, the next document, and that does all balance, as you can see. We do, like I say, I did make a mistake by overclaiming VAT, so we owe £71 to HMRC, which have already paid them effectively, and then the rest is these are all basically already accounted for, all of those except for the VAT, which we're just waiting to get repaid in the next few weeks, I would imagine.
We're all right on the VAT, aren't we? Because we've been given a period of time to pay it later, longer now.
Yeah,
So you're not going to get any penalties, I don't think.
No, we won't. We just need to owe back what we overclaimed, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody, any comments they want to make on the final accounts? Are we going to accept the work of our RFO and thank him for his hard work in putting this together? All in favour?
It was a nightmare.
Richard,
We believe you.
There's been nightmares on Elm Street, so don't worry about it. As long as you're sleeping better now.
Yes, yes.
Internal audit, what have you to report as regards the internal audit?
Well, the internal auditor basically I mean, she's a very, very thorough auditor, much more thorough than the previous people who I think were essentially trying to just making sure that we looked good. Not that we needed to learn things or improve what we were doing, but they basically just signed us off. Whereas this lady, she is an absolute stickler. So she pointed me the way of how to get the accountancy practices better, which was very positive. She did pull us on a couple of things, like for example, with regard to we keep an asset register of you know, our properties.
Yeah.
Anything we've got over a certain value, and as you've seen, we disposed of something. We disposed of a shredder, which we didn't really pay a great deal of attention to be honest. We just bought another shredder, but it was on our asset register, so we should have noted that we disposed of it. And then the other 3 things she pointed out, I didn't even know what these things were, to be honest. A keyboard, a printer, and what was the other thing? Oh, some cabling, which was in the previous office. Obviously something we've not had for quite a few years. But anyway, these haven't been accounted for. So I've drawn up a thing called a schedule of disposal, I think it's called. I've put that on the asset register, so it lists all the assets, and it also lists what we've disposed of in the last year. So that we're all on top of. She did pull us on the risk assessment as well, because she felt that some risks were quite high in terms of what we'd assessed, but she didn't feel that our action planning was good enough, and wanted us to put a time frame on it, and B, a person who was nominated to be responsible for the actions. Both of which I've done, so again they'll be ready for council for next week. Like I say, we have gone over to Realtas now, this new accountancy package. I had the training today. It's been the longest day of training I've had in ages. But I think it will be very effective, because the things it was taking me like days to do, it'll do within like 1 second. So it was quite incredible. It's very, very complicated, and it'll take me a while to get up to speed with it. But
keep control of it.
Yeah.
You might get carried away if you get it done in one minute.
There's always other work, Paul.
Yeah, there's plenty of other things to do.
Yeah, it's been. I was a bit disheartened by the visit of the internal auditor, but she was very helpful actually. She's one of these very sort of critical people and very methodical, and made me feel a bit. But then she made a few mistakes herself, which cheered me up a little. So that's been my week really, and we've addressed all the things she brought it up in her report. So again, that'll be good to go next week.
Thank you, Richard.
Okay.
Just a quick question, Paul. If that's
Sorry.
okay. Yeah, it's okay. Just a quick one. Just going back to the risk register.
Yeah.
Was she saying that we'd evaluated the risks at too high a level, or was it simply the actions that we put in place to mitigate?
I'm not sure. I think we need to have another look at it really. So we had some very obvious red. You know, there's some red bits in terms of the likelihood of damage to council property, for example, and she effectively thought that if we've got red risks, that we should have a more methodical approach to the action planning about how we meet the risks. So what she wanted was a list of specific actions to reduce the risk, a person named who was responsible for it, and a time frame to do it. So we had things like, for example, you know, like we've got the topple tests in the graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
There was something about that smart. Is it called smart paint, or I can't think what it's called now? It's this paint that you paint on top of things that
Smart water, I think it's called.
Smart water. That's it, Councillor. So we had various things that we've done, but we don't have a methodical approach to repeating it, if you know what I mean. So it was kind of trying to create a list of dates when we'd look at those again, rather than just kind of leaving them to chance, I suppose, really. So. Yeah, that was her advice with regard to the risk assessment.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Budget precept to note that it's been paid in two parts. The first half we've got, and the second half of 140,000 will be received on the 1st of November. I think that just needs noted.
Yeah.
Also to note that the anchor tenancy has been paid to the Civic Hall, and that is the rent for the office.
Yep.
Yep. Tenants is to note the council received payments for all its tenancies.
Yeah, we had one that took 2 letters to get it, but eventually it turned up. So yeah, we've got all the money for the rents, the garages, and the allotments.
Right. Bank matters to consider the direct debit for Grenk, who leased the photocopier. They want the council to pay by direct debit. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was part of our agreement with them, but then I think things got a bit messed up because of our difficulties with the mandates. So that was the reason we had problems when we first tried to set it up. So, but they're still asking us if we will. I have been paying it just by backs, and it's not been a problem, but I think they want the certainty that it's going to be paid by direct debit. So,
Right. I'll leave that in your capable care.
can we just get agreement that we want it to happen, and who's gonna do it?
You've agreed to it before. You've been in the lease, so why we've got to adhere to what we've got an agreement for?
I think we agree. No, I think that was me and Liz saying it, not council.
Yeah.
Chair, can I just ask Rich, what other people do we pay by direct debit? Are there other people?
It's only PlusNet for the phone and internet. That's it. It used to be for the mobile phone as well, but we've obviously got rid of the mobile phone. So that's.
No, so there's no reason we couldn't for this then, really.
Relevant. Pardon, what did you say?
I was going to say there's no reason therefore that we can't sort of structurally accommodate it. So.
No.
That's the problem. Okay.
Move that course of action. All in favour? Right.
Can I just ask Liz, who's mandated to do the signing of that?
Well, is this for the HSBC account?
Yeah.
Because that's all the chairman.
Okay.
But they're all signatories.
Okay.
There's 8. So it could be anyone.
Councillor Davis as well.
No, not Councillor Davis, because he's a new chairman.
Oh, well, I'm I'm so
Somebody want him
disappointed.
to- Yeah.
So can I just ask,
Hope it's comfortable.
will you be one of the mandate signers then, Councillor Dixon?
If that's what is requested, I will be, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Pogson, would you do it as well? Be a signer?
Yeah, we'll do. Yeah.
I'll bring you the thing to sign.
Okay, doc.
Thank you. That's all right. Item 16, statement of intent on training to receive report on any training by councillors or officers since the last finance and management meeting. Attendees to report. Anybody to report? Mary?
Yeah, I did last Tuesday, the 8th of July. I did 3 hours on chairing. It was notable for the fact that the trainer's Wi-Fi went down to 20 minutes in the middle of it, but she speeded up in the second half, and we managed to finish. And it was overall, it was pretty useful.
Thank you. Richard, have you anything to report?
Only today, like I just said, I've had the Realtas training with the new accountancy package that went on for about 7 hours. Virtual training, it was quite challenging.
7 hours, all at once? Joe.
Yeah.
What's Liz got to tell us? Have you been
Well,
trained?
I was let off that, thank goodness, because I didn't think I could have coped. I did, in lockdown, I did 4 webinars on contracts and specifications, freedom of information, grants and payments, and charities. And I completed my ILCA training, so I'm properly qualified in that respect.
Really?
And I did a couple of webinars on roles and communities, which is optional in the ILCA, but yeah, so I do quite a bit when I was able.
Nobody anything else to report? Right, I will take that we know the comments that have been passed and thank everybody for their efforts. Realtas Amiga accounting software. Richard has contacted Realtas confirming our intent to use the Amiga accounting package for the current financial year. Realtas are uploading our financial records and budget onto the servers. The clerk and Richard are undergoing training in the new system next Monday, which would be today. Richard, I think, is still stressed from that experience. Do you still think it's ideal and it's going to work for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very complicated, but it looks, once I get used to it, I think it's going to be really, really useful.
Very good. I think we'll thank Richard for that and move on. Is that okay? Now, number 18, now can YLCA to note the meetings of the South Pennine branch of YLCA will continue to be held virtually using the GoToMeeting platform until further notice. Do we just note that?
Yeah.
Or do we have any representatives that wish to go to that particular meeting and do it on this particular platform?
I did actually go to the last one on a Zoom, and it didn't seem at all relevant. I couldn't see any relevance to what they talked about. I didn't understand what they were talking about. So I won't be in a hurry to go to another one.
Well, that's pretty straightforward then. I'll move on to grants. To note that the RFO has uploaded detailed last year's grants onto the website, accessible from the homepage QuickBooks. He and the clerk are also maintaining a running record of grant awards for the current year, again in the quick links from the homepage. To consider implications for the deliberations of the grants working party, clerk to report. Have we got some comment there, Liz?
Well, I hope you've all had a chance to read it. I was really put in the position of having to draw everything together because we haven't got time with the schedule as it is and the way that we've asked for expressions of interest for September. We have to really come to some conclusions. So I've put together a paper and I've included that we simplify the form, we're clearer about the rules and regulations, that we have different amounts of supporting information for different size grants. And then the thing that what we hadn't decided to do this year in the Grants Working Party was actually to go out and ask for applications to come in on 2 different occasions in the year. But we've sort of gone ahead with that in CASC. So what I've suggested is that all the committees do that to some extent. I know that Service of Provision are looking to spend their 5,000 on youth projects, so it's a matter of finding them. CASC has spent all its money already on capital projects. Its whole budget for community projects is spent already. So what it's saying is, let's have in all the applications for this year and we'll have a think about where we can find that money at the end of this year or into next year. And so I've suggested that everybody follows that sort of line and we come back in September with all these expressions of interest and then we think about how we're going to prioritise what we meet.
I think we're going too far. We're making it common knowledge to everybody that there's all this money going to be available to them, and then we may not have enough in the budgets. It upsets me when I read the list of items on the grant payment, and I see some of the things, and I think, well, they weren't grants. Poppy wreaths, they aren't grants. Poppy wreaths are a thing that we've always done and given to people. It isn't a grant to anybody.
No, it probably isn't.
So, you know, when it's put down, and I just wonder somewhere along the line it doesn't just totally follow. And then when I see some of the amounts of money, I just wonder where. You see, Stotts buses, that's down as a grant, but that isn't a grant. That's been something that's been an ongoing thing that we've had as a contract with Stotts and previously with the other suppliers of the service.
But legally, it is a grant. Anything where we give money to another body, including the Holmfirth Civic Hall Community Trust, that is a grant because it's another body. That's why we have to have the legislation that supports it, and that's what.
Yeah, I'm totally bemused by some of the items on this agenda. I always thought that CASC committee had a budget, and that budget was to pay for items of the 3 properties that we have in our control: the toilets, the Civic Hall, and the Honley Library. It wasn't for just giving out willy-nilly at somebody's whim and fancy. All grants that were to go out were to all go through the Finance Committee. Whether that's what everybody's idea is now, I don't know, but it just beats me that we can give these large amounts of money out and then we're going to be short if there's a problem with the Civic Hall. The only reason for the budget being increased to the amount that it was because of the taking over of the Civic Hall, and it hasn't been as costly as we first thought. So I think that somewhere along the line, there's some money that's still left for the Civic Hall, which we can use on it in the next couple of years and maybe reduce the budget by a large amount for next year. Di, what do you have something to say?
Councillor Hogley was first, actually. She had her hand up the longest.
Sorry, I'll let I took Di, I saw Di hand, it's above I and me. I'll take Rachel in a minute. Di?
Yeah, I agree with what you've said, Paul. The main thing that concerns me about this is that we are not consistent in the amounts that we are giving out. How we can give 12,000 to one and 5,000 to another just absolutely baffles me. And I think the time has come that it's taken on merits and there's a ceiling as to how much and how many times and where they get these grants from. Thank you.
Rachel.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I think the purpose of the Grants Working Party was to look at what you've outlined, Councillor Dixon, with the conflicting views of saying that grants only came through finance and management. There's a clear distinction between the three grant streams that there are. The CASC budget is for community assets. Some of those may have previously transferred across to us, but community assets is quite a broad term. It's defined by the Charity Commission and it's on all our CASC community asset grant forms, and it's basically for buildings or facilities that are of value to the wider community. So all the grants adhere to the guidelines that were agreed with CASC, and that's been the case for a couple of years. They've been awarding grants. I think the issue this year has been that we've ultimately been a victim of our own success. People have heard, the parish council is willing to support investment in our community assets, and it's something, to be fair, that in the neighbourhood plan consultation came up a lot, that people value our community assets. And personally, I think it's quite an important thing the parish council shows that we effectively put our money where our mouth is and are happy to support them when required. But conscious of what Councillor Hall was saying about the £12,000 grant, and we can't just keep giving away huge sums of money because clearly we won't have enough money to support people. The approach CASC has taken is the expression of interest approach, which is we've spent all our money for this year because they all seemed like organisations we wanted to support, and we spent our budget in consciously doing so, not just by accident, choosing to award grants that seem suitable. But the expression of interest is a way of understanding what is the demand and the needs out in our community. It doesn't say that we're going to fund them all for these projects that they come forward with, but it says we need to understand if there's 3 different village halls that have got roofs that need replacing, then rather than being in a situation where we end up getting 3 grant applications each for £10,000, say, we then turn around and say, oh, well, we actually only set aside 15,000 and we've now got about £100,000 worth of grant applications coming our way. So at least by having the expressions of interest, we can have a sense of what are the applications that we're going to have in the future. And we might set a cap, which we've effectively set this year as £5,000, so that then we can decide whether this is how we want to spend some of the money that we raise locally in the community through the precept. And I think the other 2 committees that have grants, finance and management, has always really been focused on events and short-term projects, and the £1,000 limit seems quite sensible to me for those sorts of things. And service provision, I mean, I know what you're saying about they don't seem like grants, but actually, as Liz outlined, it's kind of the legal definition of them. And effectively, it's services that we're paying for, which again are different from assets, capital assets, which is what CASC is looking at, and just one-off events or projects, which is what F&M look after. So I think they do sit in 3 different groups, and I think we should be comfortable with having different ceilings on those groups. So that's
they sit in 3 different groups, but the 2 groups, other than the finance committee, should not be giving out grants. It's not for them to give grants to people. We're giving out money to private individuals or clubs or groups, like your cricket clubs. It's a club. You paid members there. That is what they pay their membership for, not for us to give them money. We are giving out far too much to the wrong people, because if one goes for it, everybody else will want it. If every cricket club in the Home Valley came along with a scheme for £10,000, where would we be?
Well, I think
it's wrong. The money that goes into CASC committee was for the purpose of looking after those 3 properties and not for any other purpose. And if your interpretation is different, I think it's time this council will want to look at what we're doing and do something on a nature and possibly reduce our budgets by a lot and give something back to the valley, rather than individual clubs getting this benefit. Mary?
Yes, I mean, if we get if we get too many applications, as you suggested we might, Paul, for the amount of cash available, then obviously we have to, as other grant awarding bodies do, we've got to make a decision then on the merit of those applications. And I think something that would be really useful here is for the parish council to identify its list of priorities and match the grant applications against those priorities. And just a quick point on the expression of interest. I think the idea of expressions of interest is a really good one, because I think it will widen the pool of possible applicants, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, it will mean we've got to make difficult decisions, but I guess that's what we have to do.
It'll give more people more chance to spend more money. Michael then does.
Okay, looking at the document that Liz has put together, and thank you very much for putting that together, Liz. I think it's very good, and coming down to the recommendations, I think some of the recommendations will solve some of the issues that Di has raised about the inconsistencies between different groups getting different sorts of money. I believe that if we can go out to the people and ask them to put these expressions of interest in, and I think we should do the same thing. I'm looking to do the same thing with the Service Provision Committee, that are people that contact us and the wider community that may apply to us. We can ask for them expressions of interest. We know what's likely to come down, and at that point we can say to somebody, actually, that's unlikely to get a grant from us. You may have to look elsewhere for that. We don't want to put you through the grant process when we don't think that is something that we can either legally fund or we have the wherewithal to fund what you're looking at. It will give us that opportunity. Also, they have an opportunity of having 2 dates. You can have a look what's on the table, what's across the piece. Why is these wanting this much and they're wanting that much? Which one are we getting best bang for his buck? Which one is delivering this parish council's priorities when we get them sorted out? But which one's getting the most bang for the buck? You know, who's getting the most out of this money? We can have a look at those sort of things. So, whilst we can talk about who give grants and doesn't give grants and why we should give grants and whether we shouldn't give grants at all and whether we should just wind up the parish council, give all the money back and then save the precepts that way, there's, you know, that's someone can come forward with a motion like that if they want. But where we are is this parish council give grants. We have 3 committees that give grants. We're looking at a better way of doing that, a more equitable way of doing that, and a way that we can fit in with the priorities. And I feel that the recommendations of that Liz has brought together from that working party should be pushed forward, and I agree with them wholeheartedly.
Dogs.
Thank you, Chair.
Dogs, you wanted to speak.
So just unmuting you. Again, I welcome the report. I mean, this council does give a lot of money out in grants over 100,000. I would imagine the charity sector in the Valley probably spends in excess of £5 million and possibly way more than that. But there is a danger that it becomes a free-for-all. And that means you need to have very clear processes and you need to have very clear priorities. I think not only have we not got very clear priorities, but we haven't even got a consensus about to what extent we should give grants, because I hear some voices on the council, like yourself, Chair, saying that you're thinking we're giving far too many. And then I see wide support for the CASC decisions that went through the other week when several organisations got given over £5,000 for local revenue local capital projects. So I think, as it says in the report, one of the massive priorities is in the autumn when we've got the new committees. Each of those committees needs to decide what its priorities are, because otherwise you will have far too many people coming forward with high expectations of getting money and then they're going to be disappointed. So I do think this report's useful. I wonder what are the actual concrete things we're deciding tonight of going forward. But as in section 8, it does say the hardest thing is the priorities, and that's the thing I think we're doing least well at the moment. So I think we need to have a plan of how each of those committees that give out money set and communicate those priorities.
Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, just to say, and Doug's has just reiterated really Mary's point. This issue of setting priorities, I absolutely agree. I think we've talked about this before. We, as a parish council, we do need to sit down and agree as a council what our key our key priorities are going forward, create that sort of vision of what we want to do. I've expressed a number of times before, and I know Michael has as well, that it's very important that we preserve civic buildings, but also I think extremely important that we look at what services and what we can do for the community. And I think we got to remember the context of what the money that we've got. Our precept is still very, very reasonable, which is not a bad thing. I'm not saying that is bad, but if you look at us compared to the average across England, we are absolutely way down. We're below 50% of that average, and even with some of our neighbours. So we certainly are not fleecing our residents, and if anything, there may even be in the future some opportunities if we address the priorities to actually go to the community and ask if they're willing to actually fund some of those priorities. But I think the important point is exactly as Doug's and Mary said, is actually agreeing those priorities, going out to the community with those, but also importantly, I think as part of that process is how do we engage with the community to understand what the community's priorities are within the valley. And I think that's one thing that we are pretty poor at. We try, but I think we need as a council to actually understand that, and that will help us form that vision going forward. Thanks.
Anybody else wish to speak?
Chair, do we need to take the sort of recommendations which are at the end of Liz's report? Do we need to agree on the principles of any of those?
I'm not sure whether it's the time or the place to do that now. I think it should be full council that sees that and would make a decision on that.
I just wonder, would we want to provide any recommendation, even if it's on the ones we perhaps can agree on?
Recommendation from this committee, the only recommendation that I'm prepared to make is that we don't advertise the fact that we've got thousands and thousands of pounds. I would like to know who, when the applicants make applications to the council, do they ask which committee it's going to go in front of, or do we have a criteria for pointing them in the right direction? Because if it's an idea that we point them in the right direction, I think they should all be pointed in the direction of the F&M, and there would all be maximum of £1,000. There's too many people that are getting pushed into the situation, I feel, that they can get more by going to a different committee. Michael, would you like to just say a point? Because I know you've spoken once already, but
yeah, within the report it says itself that it would be the clerks would direct it to the most appropriate committee depending on what they are wanting a grant for. But I don't think anybody said that we were going to go out and say, hey everybody, we've got this amount of money, come and ask for a grant. I think we were more going about with the expression of interest saying this parish council has a limited budget and therefore we would like to know who would be relying on us for money so we can prioritise it to the right people. What are you planning on doing are you planning on coming to us over the next year, 2 years, 3 years for anything? So we can either be prepared, tell you now you're not going to get out, or get ready for it when you do come to us. If it fits in with the council's priorities.
It bothers me that is not the way that the parish council was. I was brought to believe. Some of the old councillors will be tending in the graves. Their words to me when I started 30 some years ago. Two things: watch carefully and see what they do, and let them pay for everything, and we pay nothing out. Let's let the other people pay for it, and that's what I think we're doing too much of. We're providing funds that should be coming from elsewhere.
Just a quick comment, Paul, Chair,
yeah.
Please. I think you're right. The role of parish councils have changed, and you're absolutely right. 20, 30 years ago.
Well, it doesn't want to change. I don't like change. I think it's changing for the worst.
Well, let's just wind it all up and not have a precept to wind up the parish council. That saves everybody the most money, doesn't it?
I know, but wait a second. I think in terms of the change, I think we've got to understand. Some of us may want to change things, but Chair, this change has been driven largely by central government in terms of the localism policy. It's certainly since in the last 10 years. This has been a deliberate policy, and they're very much saying that it's now down to local level to start providing services and support for communities. So this isn't something we've invented here in particular, to be truthful. We're actually working very much in line with national policy. And if you look at NALC, and if you look at all the various bodies linked to this, that's absolutely their strategy and their vision. So you're right, it's changed, but it's not changed particularly that's driven just by us. You're
a councillor, a Kirklees councillor, Paul.
I am indeed.
So find the money from them, not from us.
Well, I think you need to talk to central government yet again, because part of localism is to drive it even further down to parish council. So this is the issue we're dealing with all the time. Anyway, sorry, Rachel, you had your hand up. I'm keeping quiet.
Rachel, and then we're going to close it.
I was just going to comment really that ultimately the money is raised within our valley. And I think actually it's done the parish council a lot of good in recent years to be seen to support. It doesn't have to be in huge sums of money, but in terms of saying actually certain things matter to us as a community and we value them. And I think the feedback from some of the projects that we've supported is really positive for the parish council and shows that we are prepared to, well, what I said before, put our money where our mouth is really, because it's as much showing leadership of the priorities. And yes, there's a lot of work to be done about thinking collectively as to what those priorities are, but in the short term, then what Councillor Pogson was saying, each committee in the autumn will be in a much better informed position if they've got a bit more information. Because I know I've sat in meetings in service provision, particularly where we've looked at the youth service budget, for example, and gone, why haven't we spent any? And and yet the next year we think, well,
don't have to spend money.
It's important that we have a youth budget, so we put one in. But then it's like, well, actually, we need to engage with local services to see whether that's money that can be spent productively in the community. So I think we need to, within each committee, it doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, it'd be nice if the full council can adopt key priorities, but I think by having that onus on each of those committees, they've each got their budget and they can set some priorities within that budget. Obviously, the overall budget set by full council, but within each committee, I think we need to give each committee a bit of autonomy to say, well, actually, within your budget, you prioritise.
That's putting it in the hands of 3 different committees, and nobody's in control then.
It's a budget.
We're giving money away. It should be our job to save money, not just to give it for the sake of it. If we've got some in the budget, and we can have it back at the end, we have it at the end of the year, we've done our job very well.
What's the point getting it back?
I'm going to conclude this matter.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it just feels again as if we're going round in circles with a minority of councillors, including the Chair in this case, Paul, trying to rewind the clock on what the council does. It's very clear we've got a majority of people on this committee and a majority of people on the council that actually think it's our duty to use the money that we get given or we collect off local people to best effect. And when you give it to local people and local community projects, you get massive value for money. And I think it's part of our job to ensure the limited amounts of money we've got are given to the most important projects locally. And that's part of our role to support them, not to hold them back. But clearly we've got 2 different mindsets on this, and it's only ever going to be resolved by a full vote at council. But then it is delegated to committees, and those committees should crack on and use that money as best they can.
Common sense should prevail. The last point on this, and then we're going to close this matter.
Right, can I just say that my fear is this, that with 3 pots, and does the left hand know what the right hand's going to be doing? If we're just one funding and one committee that was dishing it out, then we would all know what everybody else was doing. Instead of this, with three pots of money, haven't we? And no one person is responsible. I know that we've got a system, and I hope that we've got a system where people aren't getting grants out of each one. But that's my one concern, is the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. Thank
Michael,
you all.
Michael, I'm trying to wind it down, but I know you and Mary have both had your hands up. Could you do it very quick and then we'll get this done with?
Those three committees get awarded their budgets get agreed by the full council, yeah, each year, and they're charged with divesting of their budgets. You know, if the full council agrees to not fund those two of those committees, and you know that's what they could choose to do. It needs to be a vote of the full council, but currently those three committees, or each of those committees, get their budget agreed by the full council, and then they spend that as those committees agree. You know, and that's it. If the full council wants to not fund either of those committees, the full council can vote that way.
Mary, your comment.
Yeah, yes, I just think that we should make some progress on this. I mean, I think obviously we can't make decisions here because it needs to go to the full council, as Paul suggested. Would we wish to recommend this report to the full council?
Well,
have it on the
I
next
second that motion, Mary.
What I'd like to recommend and put forward from the chair is that each committee makes decisions, but then puts it back to finance for the final statement, and then we would get to the position where everybody was treated equally. With things I've been asked by Diet that we don't see everything equal. So if we've just got one body, and that to me to be the finance committee, like it always was before, it was either GP or finance, and if GP wanted something doing or spending money, they put it through to finance, for finance to recommend it or accept it or otherwise. And I think that the other groups now, your CASC and your service provision, are getting above themselves, and they're making these big decisions. And the finance committee have no hold on the money, have no say on the matter. And that at the end of the day, it should go to those committees. And if that is how they want to spend their budget, it then comes for the finance committee to accept or not. And at that stage, we get a lot more people getting grants of £1,000 because there'd be all this other 30 or 40,000 out of CASC and 20,000 out of the other maybe that we could use to give away in terms of £1,000 only. And that would mean that a lot more people would get a taste of this rather than some people just getting a good healthy chunk. I think that's all I need to say, and I think that it should be put back to the full council for a decision on this.
Councillor Dixon, Councillor Blacker has proposed a motion that's been seconded by Councillor Pogson. Do you want to go to vote?
And what was that? What was the motion again?
The motion is that we accept this report and endorse it and ask for it to be on the agenda of the next full council meeting.
All those in favour? Anybody against? Right, that motion's been carried. We go on to item 20, bank reconciliation against bank statements by member of the committee. Councillor Feeney has undertaken this task under lockdown. Richard, the report.
Oh, I just wanted, it's a shame she's not here really. I just wanted to say thanks to Bernie for the amount of work she done. I don't know whether you saw the reconciliation form she done, but it must have taken her ages. It's a very boring task, and you know, it's quite involved without being very interesting. And I'll minute it that I've thanked her, and I'd like the committee to thank her as well, please.
I think your words were well put there, Richard, about boring, because I like boring. Boring's good. but boring's cheap and it doesn't cost anything.
That's true. But anyway, I'd like to pass on the thanks of the committee to Councillor Feeney if everybody's okay with that.
Right. Have we any representation from any of the outside bodies?
I've heard nothing myself.
With that's the matter. There's something wrong with my clock. Was it possible for me to conduct a meeting that took half the time that had been allocated?
You just did.
Yeah,
I think that's a feat in itself, and I'm going to pat myself on the back for that.
absolutely.
Congratulations.
I would just like to. I'd just like
Thank you,
to.
everybody. But thank you, everybody, for taking part and getting matters closed. And let's hope that next week's meeting goes as quick.
I'd just like to say that the documents also put together by Richard this year
Yeah.
were far easier to get through and look at when I was going through them for a couple of hours before the meeting, and
Yeah.
they were a lot clearer, and I think there were a lot less questions asked about them because they
They're a
were
lot more palatable, Michael. I think that's the word. And I think people can understand them. And credit to Richard, and I think a big thank you for what he's done for us. And let's hope he can carry on producing rabbits out of hats. Well, it sounds like he found £20,000 in his first week. So if he can do that every week, we can give some grants out, can't we? Thank you, everybody. I'm going to go watch my television now. Thank you.
Bye.
Amen.
Bye.
Bye.